All right, so now let's talk about conjunction. And this code over here is a little bit different. We are not calculating circle anymore. Let's say we're trying to calculate, maybe let's say you're trying to figure out the price maybe of some tickets. And you want to do a little bit of discrimination over here. Maybe for the senior or for the younger people, you might give them some special rates, right? Very common scenario in the real life. Okay, so we're going to ask the user to actually enter their age value as an integer. And now let's consider two Boolean expression over here. Age larger than or equal to 45 and less than 5, right? These are, and again, this is the data type. Okay, let's try this. For age larger than or equal to 45 is basically like this. It's going to include 45. So now I'm just going to do this. So this part over here is larger than or equal to 45, right? It's going to include it, so I'm going to make this a solid circle over here. Okay, so let me also write it down. Is this part here is age larger than or equal to 45. And what about the next one? The purple one over here is age is strictly less than 65, right? So what I will do is it's going to be over here. It's going to be strictly less than 65. Over here, this part over here, right? You can see it does not include 65. So now what I will do is, let me also annotate it. It's actually age strictly less than 65, right? So these are the two Boolean conditions that we define. And then depending on what age is, so these two Boolean expression might evaluate to either true or false, right? Depends. So that's why we're going to test it. We're going to do the tracing like before as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about different branches. You can see we got if, else if, and also else, right? So you can see, let's see each one of them. What about is old enough? Let's see over here. So not is old enough. So that'll be one branching condition over here. So we got another one, which will be is old enough and also it's not too old, right? You can see we're using conjunction over here. And also we got the else part. Else part is basically like a neither of the above, either neither the blue or the green branching condition. Maybe they simply just evaluate to false for both of them. All right, let's see exactly how we should visualize this quickly, and then we'll get to the tracing. So now for the first one over here, what about is not is old enough? Not is old enough simply means you can see is old enough is really assigned to age larger than or equal to 45, right? If it is not the case, it is not old enough. So that means it's going to be this part over here. Before I draw that, let me mix a little bit space over here. Let me just adjust this over here. Okay, let me just put it like that. Age less than 65, all right? So now, what about it's not old enough? It's going to be the negation, this expression over here is going to be the negation of is old enough, which is referring to the orange one, right? So now it's going to be everything but that particular range. So it would be exactly strictly less than 45 like that. So this will be the part. So let me write it down. It's really important because we want to see exactly how the three branching conditions, if, else, if, and else, what they really visualize into. So this will be not is old enough. Right? You can see this is exactly the negation of this particular orange part, right? What about the second branching condition? For the else if part, so that's why we're using conjunction over here. We're saying that it should be both, it is old enough, it should be old enough, and also it's not too old. It's not too old, it should be also strictly less than 65. So we're basically trying to look for their intersection over here. All right, so that's about how to use conjunction to specify some interval. So now for the green one, it's going to be exactly, so starting from 45, but does not include 65. So that's the one. So the green one over here is going to be is old enough. I'm just going to write it in short. Conjunction, and also is not too old. All right, guys, I hope you're okay with this. Okay, it's really important to see the blue one and the green one, they are not intersecting, so they are completely disjoint. You can see the blue one over here is going just up to here, and the green one starting from 45 is going to up to here without including 65. And then the last one, the else part, will just be everything else, which will be exactly just this. Right? Let me be complete over here about the drawing. So the else part will just be over here. You can think about this is the final default action, where the default action is going to take place. So this will be the else part. Right? I really try to visualize exactly the following. By defining this and this Boolean conditions, we can actually use the branching condition, not is old enough, and also interval over here, and also the else, to really specify 3 non-overlapping or simply disjoint intervals. So this is one interval, and this is just another interval, and this is just another interval. So that's really the insight you want to look into this particular example. It's actually even more important than the example itself. All right? All right, so now finally, let me now trace the code in both the paper and maybe a little bit on the Eclipse. Okay, so now let's try to trace the code. So this is just a clean version of the same code over here. Let's try 3 different test cases. So we got 30, first of all. Okay, let's try this. So now, let's say the user simply enter 30. So that means the age over here would just be 30. And then, let's try to evaluate the Boolean conditions first. 30 larger than or equal to 45 should be false. Agree? And also, 30 less than 65 should be true. So now we got false and also true for the input value over here. And then let's try the following. Okay, we're going to evaluate the very first branching condition over here. So now it's old enough. We know that it's already false, right? So now not false is going to give you, right? So not false is going to give me true. So I'm going to get true value over here. That means I'm just going to execute whatever it is specified over here for the block. So here I simply put comment, meaning that whatever code you have to write over here, but you know you should really go into this particular branch. All right. And the rest is going to just be bypassed. The rest. All right, so that's the first one. All right, let's see the second one. The second one is going to be 50 over here. So now let's say the user is going to enter maybe 50. So age is now going to be 50. All right, and now let's try to evaluate. Is old enough 50 larger than or equal to 45 should be true. I'll put true over here. And also, 50 less than 65 should be also true. So both are true. So now let's try the following. So now if you evaluate this branching condition over here, we know that it's old enough is actually true at the moment, not true. It's going to give you false, right? According to the definition. So now this part, this not true. So this branching condition here is going to be false. So that means we're going to bypass. And then, what about the else if part? For the else if over here, we're going to evaluate is old enough. We know that it's actually true. And also, and is not too old is also true. Meaning that both are true, right? So in that case, remember that's the only case where, remember the only case you can get true for conjunction will be when both operands are true. So that means this part over here, we'll get true and also true is going to give you true. So that means we're going to execute this particular middle age, whatever code that's associated with it, and then we're going to bypass the else part. All right, hopefully so far you're okay with the I'm trying to use different colors over here just to show you the execution path. It's really important. Finally, let's try the third case over here, 70, right? So now if I try, so the user is going to read 70, right? So now age is going to be stored 70 over here. And let's try to evaluate. 70 larger than or equal to 75 should be true. Okay, is old enough, it's just going to be true. And 70 less than 65 should be false. Meaning that is not old, it's not too old, it's actually false. So we got true and false. All right, but we're still going to evaluate branch by branch. So now I'm just going to do this one here. So now evaluate this branch. is old enough, we know that it's already actually true. And not true is going to be false. So that means we're going to bypass this particular branch, right? And then when we evaluate the else if part, it's going to be is old enough, which is true, and is not too old, which is going to be false. We got true and false. So if you look at that, true and false is going to be false because at least one of the operands is actually false. So now we have no choice but go to the else part and then execute whatever that's associated with senior. Alright, of course this part is bypassed. Alright guys, I think that's okay for you to execute on the paper. Again, I will encourage you to really write this down, maybe on a piece of paper, and then to really try to trace it by yourself as well. It's a very beneficial exercise for you to do. And now, I'm just going to do one of them on the Eclipse, just to show you. Why don't I do the middle one? Let's do 50 over here on Eclipse. And then, for the other two exercises, I'll just put the exercise for now, and then I'll do it on Eclipse. Exercise. Try 30 and also 70 on debugger. And I'm just going to do just the middle one, 50 together with you, right? Just to save time. Now switch to Eclipse and then open the file, logical operation conjunction over here, and double click on that. And then we are simply just going to put the breakpoint line number 10 over here. Double click and then you'll see line number 10. All right, so now let's read some value for the age from the user. Okay, so I'm gonna launch the debugger. For the first time, I'm gonna right click on the file and say debug as Java application. All right, so now I'm gonna try 50, the middle one. All right, now I'm gonna switch to the debug perspective. And now let me simply get rid of all the previous expressions. They don't make sense anymore. So remove all the expressions and say yes. All right. So now let me just set it up. So the two Boolean condition over here. First of all, you can see under expression, you can see age has been set to 50. And I want to know the expression value over here. You can see age larger than or equal to 45, and also age less than 65. So they are both true, right? And now we can see also the branching condition over here. We can try again. We can try as well. You can simply copy that, and then we can type, and then paste. So the first branching condition is old enough. Oh, the reason is we haven't really set these two expressions yet, right? You can see, remember the we pause right before executing these two lines. Why don't we do these two lines first? All right, I'm just going to execute. You can see after this, you can see now not is old enough would make sense. But before that, you can see now these two expressions have been set true and true into the variables is old enough and also it's not too old, right? That's been what's happened. Let's now predict is old enough over here, and then we put the exclamation mark. You can see we simply flip. It's old enough over here is actually larger than or equal to 45 is true. Not true would be false, right? That's what we did on the paper, on the iPad. And then the second branching condition here, I want you to also type or copy. And then I can say copy, and also add new expression, paste. You can see the second branching condition is actually true. So that means we're gonna get into it. All right, we can predict exactly what's gonna happen since the first branching condition is false. So now I know that if I say step over, we're going to jump to line number 16. We're going to bypass that first branch, right? Line number 16. And then if I say step over again, because currently this particular branching condition, as we predicted, is going to be true. So if I say step over, I'm going to go into it. Let's say step over. So we're going to say middle-aged. And then step over again. So now middle-aged. Exactly, that's being printed out, right? Okay, let me stop it. And oh, by the way, if I say step over again, am I going to execute this? Hopefully, no, you wouldn't be, right? Because you're going to bypass. Because we have already executed the first satisfying branch. All the rest will be ignored. If I say step over again, so we don't do it. So simply the input and close the next line. All right, let's stop it and go back to the Java perspective. Okay, hopefully so far I did very thoroughly together with you for negation and also conjunction. Let's now move on to the last example for disjunction. All right, let's switch to disjunction over here. And similarly, let's now really try to visualize what's really being set here for the program. So later on, if you consider different programs, you will also be able to visualize yourself. That's a very important reasoning technique. let's try this. We got two Boolean condition here. We got is senior is assigned to age larger than or equal to 65. Let's try this. So age larger than or equal to 65. So 65 is going to be included, right? Larger than or equal to 65 is exactly over here, include 65. So now this part here, let me annotate it. It's going to be is senior over here. So this will be is senior. And which will be age larger than or equal to 65. Right? Just annotate it. And what about the purple one? The second one over there is going to be is child is assigned to age strictly less than 18. Strictly less than. So now let me try to do that. Strictly less than 18, so does not include 18. So it would be something like this. Just like that. Alright? And then let me also annotate it over here. This will be is child. And then age strictly less than 18. Right? So these are the two Boolean conditions. But now let's consider how many branches are possible. So now in this case, you can see either if or else. So only got two possible branches. So let's now talk about this one over here. Is senior or is child. It's basically talk about either this will be true or this will be true, right? So now it's or rather than and. So now for this one here, I'm going to be careful here. So is senior is basically going to be exactly over here, including 65. Okay, and then let me be even more explicit. It should also be a solid dot over here, right? So it's going to include that particular value. So that will include it. Or is child over here. Is child is going to be satisfying exactly this. Does not include 18. Okay, actually, let me write it better. Like that. So these are, let me just be careful here. 18 should not be included. Should it? Alright. So now you can see there are two branches over here. If we satisfy this particular first branch, so that means the value that the user input is going to fall into either this range or this range. What about the else part? The else part is going to be basically the rest. And the rest part, let me write it down, is going to be the else part is going to be exactly over here, including 18, but excluding 65. So this will be the else part, right? All right, guys, I hope that's okay for you. So that's about, again, the similar visualization I did for conjunction over here. So I think that these two examples hopefully give you enough hints about how you can visualize for your own program later. All right, so now let me try to trace the three inputs on paper very quickly. Let's now switch to a clean page for the same piece of code. Let's now do one by one. So let's say 70 over here. So the user is going to enter 70. So now the age will be stored, the value is 70. And then what about each of the Boolean condition? 70 larger than or equal to 65 should be true. Meaning that is senior is going to be true. And then 70 strictly less than 18 should be false. And its child is going to store false. Alright, so we got true and false. And now for the if branch over here, we're going to evaluate it. So now what about the evaluation over here? So now you can see is senior, we know that it's actually true. And also is child, we know that it's actually false. And then we are using disjunction over here. So true or false, at least one of them is actually true. The result is going to be true. So it's going to be true. Alright, so that means we're going to execute whatever code that's associated with this particular branch. And then we're going to bypass the else part. Right? So hopefully it makes sense. That'll be for the first input. What about if 15, let's say? Basically, it's either senior or child that will give them discount. Otherwise, for the middle age, too bad. You're going to give them no discount, right? What about the green one? The child. Seems to be discount should still be the case, but let's try. So now 15. So now when we read the input over here, it's going to store 50. Oh, sorry, not 50, 15. All right, let's evaluate it. 15 larger than or equal to 65 should be false. Meaning that is senior over here will be false. 15 less than 18 will be true. meaning that its child over here will be true. All right, so now what do we evaluate? Its senior, as we said, is going to be false. And then its child over here is going to be true. And then we're using disjunction. False or true? False or true? True. At least one of them is actually true. So it's going to be true. So now when we evaluate this particular condition here, it's going to be true as we said. So now we're also going to execute this block of code. And then we're going to bypass the else part, just like the blue one, like the case of a senior over here. All right, finally, let's try the middle-aged person, which too bad, they may not have discount. Right? In that case, we'll see 40. So now we're going to read in. The input over here is going to be 40. So now age will be storing 40. All right? And then 40 larger than or equal to 65 should be false. And then, so that means its senior is going to be false. Right? And 40 less than 18 is going to be false, meaning that we're going to store false for the its child, right? So now we got false and false. So now we got false and also false when we evaluate this particular first branching condition. So we basically got false or false. So that's the only way you can actually get false for disjunction as we talk about. So it's going to be false. All right, since this is false, we're going to bypass the body of this particular branching condition, and then since there's no else if over here, so we are going to go for the default action. So it's going to be executed. All right, so that's about execution on paper, and I'm not going to bother you with the Eclipse. However, I think it's really compulsory for you to really try the Eclipse exercise for you. I have already illustrated so many times about Eclipse in this week's lecture. I really want you to be independent and really try this. I can write it down for you. So it will be important exercise. Try all values 70, 15, and 40 in debugger. Right? Do it for the sake of your own understanding. I really think you should really do it, because the more familiar you're really with the debugger, and also to see how the code will behave in slow motion, I think the better chance you will actually write bug-free code in a long term. All right, so that's about it. I think for this week, we're going to pause over here for the discussion, and then we can only get to the basics about logical operator and also some the if statement meaning. But you have seen enough number of examples, so later on when you got lab exercises, you should be able to at least get started. And for next week, for week number 3, we're going to finish the topic about selections, and then we're going to talk about many more logical operators and something called short circuit effects, and also give you many more examples about if statement and also common errors and pitfalls.